please turn with me to Luke 21. We'll be reading verses 1 through 4. Again, that is Luke 21, verses 1 through 4. And you may stand in honor of the Word of God this morning. And he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. And he said, Of a truth, I say unto you that this poor widow hath cast more in than they all. For all these have of their abundance cast into the offering of God. But she of her penury hath cast in all the living that she had. Our opening passage, it takes us to Jesus, looking on as others begin bringing gifts and placing them into the temple treasury. Now, unlike our forms of giving today that typically involve less noticeable arrangements, like offering plates or boxes placed around the entrances towards sanctuaries, or even QR codes that allow people to give via their phone online without being noticed at all, history reveals that in this particular temple, they had a whole court dedicated to the giving of gifts. Known as the Court of the Women, this area in the temple that was about 200 square foot had 13 chests in it, also known as trumpets. 9 of them were dedicated to the required offerings, the required tithes of the worshipers. 4 of them were given to free will or voluntary gifts. Now, the first thing I'd point out is, man, these people were required to give just to walk through the door. Can you imagine? You imagine this? I say it like a pastor. Could you imagine that today? Could you imagine having to pay just to walk through the door? I mean, you have to pay to go everywhere else, right? Okay, enough about that. I'll move on because I can tell the room got so much colder, and although I like the cold myself, I don't like the looks that are associated to that cold, so I'll just keep on walking, keep on cruising, right? But anyway, there were these trumpets, and they called them trumpets, set all around, and they were all connected to the pillars of the portico within this court. One article on the history of this temple couldn't help but realize the irony and allurement of naming them trumpets, associating it to probably the attitudes of many people who came in to the temple, right? I mean, they came in with their ideas and with their wanting to be noticed. Hey, in my almsgiving, I want you to notice just exactly how much I'm giving to this particular thing or that particular thing. Because guess what? All of these trumpets were also designated. They had signs around them saying, hey, this is for the building fund. Hey, this is for the widow's outreach. Hey, this is for this. Hey, this is for that. The other day I was in Kroger and I stopped by the Coinstar. Anybody familiar with that? Okay. Coinstar is where you can take those big old water jugs, those 5-gallon ones that come with a little hook that I always found interesting. You go boop, boop, and try to blow across and get that nice foghorn sound. That one. But anyway, I was watching as this gentleman was pouring these coins into this Coinstar machine. Now, I was watching from a safe distance because, let's face it, I'm not going to be creepering on this person. But this was on my mind, right? And they were probably rightly named because when you think about it, the currency of the time was coin-based. So if someone walked in having a ton of coins to give in this brazen vessel, I'm sure it sounded a lot like that Coinstar machine or a lot like one of those casino slot machines. All of these coins just falling down in there. And I'm sure the person's just like, yeah. Go ahead and turn it on up. Yeah. Right? I'm sure they made a lot of noise. A lot more noise than, say, someone who dropped a single penny. You know? And so I'm sure they had very much a right to be called trumpets, and I'm sure that people who were giving often blew their own trumpet, as it was, to say, man, you hear that noise? Don't worry, that's just me. God's blessed me so much that I'm just making myself a blessing to everybody. Mark even goes so far as to say that Jesus set over and against this spectacle, these trumpets. Now, in a literal sense, to be over and against something means to be sitting directly opposite of it. Hi, I'm over against you right now. So in other words, quite literally, Jesus had a center stage and front row seat to the entire thing. He's just sitting there watching. But to be over and against also contains a form of irony too, because it can also symbolically mean to be opposed to it, as conflicting ideas or two nations that are at odds with one another. So in this moment, the metaphoric side of this could be just as true also, because Jesus often spoke out against the spectacle of giving. Say, when you give your alms, be not as the hypocrites, for they like to sound the trumpet in the synagogues and in the streets, showing all that they have done to be praised of men. I tell you, don't be like them, because that is their reward. But instead of being like them, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. You know? Don't let your mind know what your pocketbook is doing. I like putting it that way. You know why? Because the second our mind gets into, man, I got to pay this, I got to pay that, I got to pay the... If we just let our hands give and not let our mind take over and think about it, we'd be so much better off. We'd be so much better off. But he spoke out against the spectacle of giving. And yet here he is, sitting there, watching all of this take place, and then something very, very interesting happens. For the Bible reveals that as all of these rich people are making all this big noise with all their big gifts, Jesus sees a widow as she puts in 2 mites. He notices it. He notices it so much that he calls over his disciples and say, hey, did you see her? Did you see her? The little lady there? Yeah. I tell you right now, she has given more than all of them combined. For they of their abundance gave. She of her life, she of her poverty, has given all that she has. In this moment, a lot of things are brought to the forefront, right? The first thing that is brought to the forefront is that we realize that what is important to God is not the size of the gift, it is the heart behind it. It's the spirit in which it is given. Yes, this makes us realize that God doesn't care for begrudgingly given gifts. He can't stand guilt-based gifts. And he doesn't overvalue big gifts or the gift giver just because of the size of them. It teaches us that God doesn't need our money. If God needed our money, then the amount of money that we gave would be more important than the giving of our heart, which is the most valuable thing that we can give to God. It teaches us that the value of the gift is determined by who? Us. Us. Not what we possess. Don't get it twisted. It's determined by us inside. How we feel about it. How we're giving it. This is all determined inside. And so Jesus is watching her as she gives. He tells his disciples to take notice of her giving. And they are taken aback by it. Why? Why notice this? Why notice this? But even ultimately, every element of that lay beside the point. The point that he noticed every single gift. Jesus notices everything we give. He notices if it's the most, if it's the least. He notices the quality of the gift and the heart behind it. Now, a mite, known as a lepton, was a Jewish coin, and it was actually the smallest of the coins. According to Stanford University, a mite in today's terms would be worth about 1/8 of a penny. When was the last time you walked into a parking lot or at a store in front of the cashier stand, saw a penny on the ground and picked it up? Now, my wife didn't raise her hand, but I know she does it too. Oh, she did this. Yeah. Now, take that penny, cut it into 8 equal servings, lay the other 7 back down, and you have the value of this mite. Like, I ain't picking up that. Some people don't pick up a quarter on the ground. It was also considered 1/64th of the denarius, which was a day's wage for the common laborer. 1/64th. Now, I did the math on this, okay? And the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Now, that's not to be confused with the state wages that differ depending upon the state's economy. The federal wage is $7.25 an hour, and it's weighed against that. Now, if you figure that wage on an 8-hour day, that's $58. $58 a day, all right? 1/64th of that is 91 cents. Imagine someone were to walk up to you and say, hey, guess what? I got your pay for the day. It's 91 cents. What? Now, you best take that back, and you best move that decimal point at least 2 more times this way. Because ain't no way you paying me 91 cents for a day's worth of work. We'd all feel that way. You can act like you wouldn't feel that way, but you work a day. You work a day voluntarily, and I guarantee you will know what it feels like. You will. But that is the equivalent of it. 91 cents for a full day instead of getting the $58. And she brought in 2 of them. This brings me to my second point, which was the value of her gift, and Jesus' remarks on it were entirely because of that it came from her life, not of what she could let go of. Think about it. Widows, typically, unless they had dowries, family inheritance, or existing family members like children, widows had very little in the way of provision. Yes, some widows had houses. Yes, some widows had inheritance. How do we know this? Because Jesus condemned a lot of the scribes and the Pharisees by saying, you that devour widows' houses. In other words, they would come up to some of these widows and say, hey, if you really want to enter into the kingdom of God, the temple needs this. He would say that. They would say that. Taking from those who had very little to give to begin with. And of course, they weren't the only ones that were guilted into this type of giving, which Jesus openly condemned. But the point is, given what Jesus discerned about this particular widow, right? What did he discern? He discerned that she was giving everything. That's what he said. Everything. Given what he had discerned, she could have given 1 mite and held 1 back, right? And no one would have blamed her. Why? Because giving 1/2 of everything you have is still better than giving of whatever you have left over. But she didn't. She gave everything. In this moment, she made a choice that it was better to give everything to God than to keep any of it held back. Literally, that's a great choice to make. But now I'm going to take it to a spiritual level, right? How many of you are still holding on to part of yourself? Saying, God, you can wash me. God, you can clean me. God, you can direct every part of my body except for this area. That belongs to me. How many of you are keeping something back instead of just giving it? Because, make no mistake, Jesus sees it too. If he sees what we give, he knows what we are giving of ourselves. He knows what we're holding back of ourselves. He sees that. In this moment, I couldn't help but see the irony in another situation involving a widow. But before I go there, I want to talk about the prophet who shared in that irony. The Bible reveals in 1 Kings 17 that Elijah prophesied before all of the nation that it wouldn't rain for 3.5 years. Now, that's a terribly long time, especially in the arid climate that they were in. Terribly long time. But God told him, you have to do this because my people need to learn where the water actually comes from. They think it comes from Baal, but it comes from me. You may think your bread is buttered by Kroger, Walmart, but your real bread is buttered by God. God had to teach the people a lesson. But what about the prophet? What about the prophet? Well, the Bible reveals that he told the prophet, go down to the river that is Cherith. There I will have commanded ravens to feed thee, and you can drink from the brook that is there. Spectacular, really? Because it reveals that Peter wasn't the first person that had to realize when God cleanses something, it's clean. I didn't know this until just the other day. I didn't realize it until just the other day. People always think about the white sheet that came down before Peter, and he says, do not call what I have cleansed thou common, right? There were all manner of beasts on this sheet. He said, rise, Peter, kill and eat. And we always think about, this is the lesson that he was given because of Cornelius, right? He wasn't the first one to receive this lesson. It was Elijah. Because Elijah received bread and meat from the mouths of ravens, birds. Weren't supposed to be eating that, much less things that came from it. In this moment, Elijah had to realize, God has commanded me to do something. That in myself does not feel right to me. Is it better to obey God, or is it better to stick with what makes me feel comfortable within myself? The spirit of the law versus the literal letter of the law. Of course, he chose the spirit in the law. Which reminds us also of the fact that God favors the spirit of the gift before the gift itself. That is more important. But anyway, as he is standing there, as he is receiving this bread, this meat from the ravens, as he is drinking from the brook, the Bible reveals that he watches. That didn't happen overnight, but nevertheless it happened. The Bible reveals that the river dried up. Here he is, being told by God, go down to the river. I'm going to let ravens feed you. I'm going to let the brook give you water. And every time he takes a little drink, he notices the water's going down a little more, right? Eventually, it ain't nothing but mud in there. God let the river dry up in front of him. Why would God do that? God did that because he wanted Elijah to have trust in the giver of the gift and not the gift itself. God often places gifts in our lives for a season to go through those dry moments in our lives. And then we depend upon them so much that we start to look to it for our answers, look to it for our salvation instead of realizing from whence it came. We do that with people. We do that with situations. Man, my job is so great. If it weren't for my job, man, I would not know where to begin with my life. My life would fall into utter chaos. Is your life in your job's hands, or is your life in God's hands? I am so proud that you answered that way. Because many people do not. They'll say it. But if you were to honestly say, look, God goes, I want you to leave that job. And it will be told you what you must do. Well, now, God, you're going to have to give me a little more information than that. Why? Is your faith in that position, or is your faith in me? Jesus said it very plainly to those who sought him on the other side of the lake, right? He said, you didn't come because of the miracles. You didn't come because of the word. You came because the loaves and the fishes that you received for one meal that you ate. Labor not for that stuff that is temporary. Labor for the stuff that is everlasting. In other words, don't focus on these temporary things. Focus on the one that gives eternally. That is what we're supposed to do. God let the river dry up right in front of the prophet's eyes because he had to show him, look, you're going to need this lesson to give to somebody else. And afterwards, what did he tell him? He said, here's where the irony comes in. Behold, I have commanded a widow to sustain you. I've commanded a widow to now sustain your life. Well, really? Okay. A widow in Zarephath, you go to her. She has been commanded to sustain you. He comes there to this widow, and he says, hi, I'm a traveling prophet of God. Hey, thanks. And he says, how are things with you? How are things in your situation? God has told me that I need to come to you. That we are to work together for mutual blessing. Now, I know I'm ad-libbing, but this is basically the gist of it. And then this widow lets him have it. Of all the people in the world, you had to come to me. I mean, I'm serious. I have nothing but 2 sticks, and I would use both of them to beat you on the head if I didn't need them. Like a little snare drum. Said, lo, right now I only have just enough meal in the barrel and enough oil in a cruse so that me and my son can have a cake. Afterwards, we are both going to perish. I know this. Elijah says, go ahead. Make that cake. But before you make yours, before you make your son's, make God one first. In this moment, just like I am sure of it as I am standing right here, just like that widow who walked into the court, she was facing the same exact choice as the widow in front of Elijah. I have an opportunity to gauge what I value more. Is it the meal? Is it the oil? Or is it obeying God? Because God had already told her, when that prophet comes, you need to take care of him. God had already said it. She wasn't blindsided by this. She already knew. And I am sure that that widow in the temple already knew as well. God had already told her, you need to give that. But God, you don't understand. These are my last 2 mites. I want to know what you value. Do you value what's in your hand? Or do you value what I can give you? Do you value what is sitting in your pocket? Or do you value what can fall from heaven for you? This is what was happening in that moment. And not only did this widow, who was standing there in the court, being dealt with by God, have a choice to make, her choice was being watched by Jesus. Jesus was watching the choice that she was making. I point that to each and every one of you and me, that when we are offered those choices, Jesus still is watching. Watching to see what we value. The widow went back. She made Elijah a cake. And then the Bible reveals that she, Elijah, and her son ate a much longer time on what was left in that barrel and that cruse. That there was just enough for the day. A lot like that brook, right? You don't need extra. You don't need more. You need what you need. You need what you need. And you know what you really need? You need God. That's what you really need. You don't need all of this extra. You don't need an extra zero on the bank account. What you need is an extra moment in prayer talking to Him. You don't need another car. What you need is another opportunity to talk with Him, to learn about Him. I have no idea No idea, because the story doesn't continue with her. But I am persuaded by what happened with Elijah that that widow who walked into that temple and gave those 2 mites, the 2 mites that Jesus noticed, was taken care of just like that widow in Zarephath. She received the things that she needed every day in and out. Why? Because the same God who spoke there to Elijah spoke there that day to her. The same God who took care of her and the prophet of God took care of her and would take care of her. And it's the same God that will take care of you. We have to realize and honestly believe that. We have to take it within ourselves, and when we have that moment where we are struggling to give of ourselves, we honestly have to ask ourselves the question, what is more valuable to me? What is more valuable to me? You heard a testimony. You heard a testimony. You cannot outgive God. You can't. You can certainly be stingier than He is, but you can't outgive Him. This brings me to the close of my message and to a question. For that same thing that Jesus took notice of, the same heart, the same spirit, even the size of it, and all that goes along with it, is what He notices today. So with that in mind, what are you giving to God? Is it your best? Is it your most? Is it your least? Does it contain real value because you seek to sacrifice of yourself so that He can have more of you? Or is it whatever you can let go of? God, you can have this. I no longer needed it anyway. In that respect, it's a lot like the donations we give to the Goodwill, right? That's what it would be compared to. I no longer need this, so out of the goodness of my heart, I'm just going to give it away. If you think for one moment that that compares to what that widow did in that temple, you are sorely mistaken. God sees what we give. Some of these attributes are what made the widow's gift so valuable. Do you share in some of those attributes? The widow in Luke and in Mark challenged the mindset that so many people have. I will give when I have it to give. If you honestly assess yourself, you already have it to give. You're just choosing not to. She gave all that she had to God. Every bit of herself. She placed her life, her provision, her protection, the next day in His hands. God, I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know today I can give you all of me today. I can give you that because it's mine to give. Just as Jesus, when He was standing before Pontius, He said, you have no power over me. None. I give my life. I have the power to give it. I have the power to take it up again. I certainly have the power not to be here. I am choosing to be here. You make a choice on what you feel that's worth in your giving. You make a choice in determining the value of such a gift. That was the giving of all. Samuel 24 reveals that David would not take the land from Obed. He said, I will not take anything from you to offer to God that costs me nothing. The widow would not give anything to God that didn't cost her something. Gifts from the heart always have cost. If you don't miss them, if they don't impact you or affect you, they probably weren't that much of a gift to begin with. Again, this is not a message harping about money. If you think that, you've missed it entirely. This is a message about how much you are giving of yourself. Many of you know, and I have said it before, I will say it again. I don't care about the money. I believe that if you change the heart of the person, money's not an issue. If they're holding on to that, it's because their heart's not changed. They haven't realized what God has done for them. I ask that God open your eyes to what He's done for you. Learn from the lessons of the widow who met Elijah. Learn from the lessons of the widow in the temple that was under the eyes of Jesus. Learn to be a giver of yourself. Not just to others, but to God. If you can't outgive God monetarily or tangibly, do you honestly think you can give Him more of yourself than He can give you of Himself? John said, "Empty me of myself so that I can be filled with you." That's the goal.